Every morning, the same woman sat in the darkest corner of the diner. Frail body, tattered coat, matted hair. Everyone whispered about her, called her crazy, a nobody. Steaming cup of tea and warm muffins in front of her without speaking. Then one Tuesday, the door burst open. 6 security guards in Navy uniforms, 3 attorneys in tailored black. They searched the room and demanded, "Who is the man who has been caring for her each morning? Who is she? What was it about that broken woman that brought them to Marcus?" Marcus Chen wiped the counter for the 4th time that shift. The cloth was already soaked and dirty, but his hands kept moving in patterns anyway. It gave him something to focus on while the minutes crawled toward 7 o'clock. The diner reeked of scorched coffee and stale oil. Riverside Diner wasn't the type of establishment people visited for the atmosphere. They came because the prices were low and the doors opened before sunrise. He'd been manning the morning shift for 3 years now. His wages barely covered the rent and food bills, never leaving anything extra. His daughter Emma was 9 years old and constantly needed new clothes because children grew relentlessly and destroyed fabric even faster. Marcus dwelled on this constantly, on how expensive everything was and how empty his wallet stayed. On the past due water bill sitting on his kitchen counter back home, on how his co-workers watched him when he volunteered for overtime like he was pathetic. He was pathetic, but he resented that they could detect it. The bell rang. A woman entered. She wore a dark coat that appeared salvaged from a charity bin. The material was faded and the sleeves were shredded. Her hair fell loose and greasy around her shoulders. She avoided everyone's gaze. She moved to the darkest corner of the diner and settled at the same booth she always selected, the one near the window facing the parking lot. Marcus had noticed her before. She appeared almost daily now, perpetually silent, perpetually isolated. The other employees nicknamed her the Vagrant. One of the servers, a woman named Lisa, had mentioned once that the woman probably lived under the highway overpass. Another co-worker, a guy named Frank, said she made his skin crawl and that someone ought to notify the authorities, but nobody ever did. They simply avoided her. Marcus didn't avoid her. He approached with a pot of tea and a small dish. On the dish were 2 muffins, warmed and broken into smaller portions. He placed both down before her without uttering a word. She glanced up at him momentarily. Her eyes looked exhausted. She didn't smile, but she nodded slightly. Then she reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a handful of coins. She counted them carefully and arranged them on the table. It wasn't sufficient for both the tea and the muffins, but Marcus said nothing. He simply nodded in return and walked away. Lisa leaned against the counter beside the register and observed him. She shook her head disapprovingly. "You realize she's never going to pay properly, right?" Lisa said. Marcus shrugged. He poured himself a cup of coffee and took a drink. It was scalding and tasted metallic. "She's not causing problems," Marcus said. "She's causing me problems," Lisa muttered. "Makes this place look terrible." Marcus didn't reply. He turned back to the counter and resumed wiping it down. The woman in the corner sipped her tea gradually. She cradled the cup with both hands like she was attempting to warm herself. The muffins remained untouched for a while before she eventually picked up a piece and consumed it. She chewed cautiously, like it caused discomfort. Marcus wondered whether she had dental problems, or perhaps she was simply that famished. This pattern continued for months. She appeared almost daily. Marcus brought her tea and muffins. She paid whatever she possessed. Sometimes it was adequate. Usually it wasn't. The other staff continued complaining, but Marcus disregarded them. He had his own troubles to manage. Emma's school had distributed a notice saying there was a science camp approaching and it required $45. Marcus didn't have $45. He would need to devise something, perhaps volunteer for an additional shift, perhaps postpone purchasing groceries for several days. One morning it was pouring relentlessly, the kind of downpour that penetrated jackets and made the pavement smell like chemicals and metal. The woman arrived completely drenched. Her coat was saturated with water and her hair clung to her neck. She settled in her customary spot and didn't remove the coat. Marcus brought over the tea and muffins. When he positioned the plate down, he noticed her hands were trembling. She attempted to pick up the knife to spread the jam, but her fingers wouldn't obey. The knife tumbled onto the table. Marcus observed her. She was staring down at her hands like they had failed her. He retrieved the knife and divided the muffins into smaller pieces himself. Then he spread jam on each piece and placed the plate back before her. She looked up at him. Her eyes were moist, but he couldn't determine if it was from the rain or something deeper. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice was gentle and controlled. It startled him. He had anticipated her to sound harsh or damaged, but she didn't. She sounded like someone who previously had a different existence. "You're welcome," Marcus said. She studied him for an extended moment, then selected a piece of muffin and ate it. Following that, circumstances shifted slightly. She still appeared every morning, but now she would acknowledge Marcus when he brought her tea. Sometimes she would pose small questions. How was his morning? Was it hectic? Simple inquiries. He answered them simply. He didn't understand what else to express, but the questions persisted, and eventually they transformed into something resembling conversation. One morning she inquired if he had family. He informed her he had a daughter. She asked her age. He said 9. She asked her name. He said Emma. She nodded and drank her tea. "That's a beautiful name," she said. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded. Several days later, Marcus had to bring Emma to the diner. The child care provider had canceled at the last moment, and he couldn't afford to miss a shift. Emma sat at the counter with a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. She was peaceful and well-mannered, but Marcus still felt guilty. A diner at 7 in the morning was no environment for a child. The woman in the corner noticed. She watched Emma for a period, then stood up and approached. Marcus tensed. He didn't know what she intended to do, but she simply smiled at Emma and asked if she could observe what she was drawing. Emma showed her. It was a picture of a butterfly. She told her it was remarkably beautiful. Then she asked if she knew how to create origami animals. Emma shook her head. She retrieved a napkin and folded it methodically. Her hands moved slowly but accurately. When she finished, she handed Emma a small paper butterfly. Emma stared at it like it was miraculous. "Wow," Emma said. "Can you show me how?" She nodded. She sat down beside her and demonstrated how to fold. Marcus watched from behind the counter. He experienced something peculiar in his chest, something warm and uncomfortable simultaneously. Emma looked up at her while they folded and asked, "Why do your eyes look sad?" The woman stopped folding. She studied Emma for an extended time. Then she smiled, but it didn't illuminate her features. "I'm not sad right now," she said gently. Emma seemed content with that response and returned to folding. Following that day, the woman visited the diner more regularly. She still sat in the dark corner, but now she would wave at Emma if she was present. She would speak with Marcus slightly longer. She asked him things, what he enjoyed doing, what he aspired to. He told her he previously wanted to open a bakery. She asked why he abandoned it. He said reality intervened. She nodded like she comprehended. One morning, she asked him if he ever contemplated beginning again. He laughed and said he didn't possess the resources or the opportunity to begin again. She looked at him earnestly. "If you did," she said, "would you?" He contemplated it. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said, "I believe I would." She smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had witnessed from her. "Good," she said. Marcus didn't understand what she meant by that, but something about how she expressed it remained with him. The following week, she didn't appear. Marcus noticed immediately. He prepared the tea anyway. He divided the muffins. He positioned them on her table and left them there, even though the seat was vacant. Lisa observed him do it and rolled her eyes. "She's not returning," Lisa said. "People like that never remain." Marcus didn't respond. He simply returned to work. But the seat remained vacant. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. By the 4th day, Marcus experienced something he hadn't anticipated. He felt concerned. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she resided. He didn't know anything about her except that she visited the diner every morning and drank tea and ate muffins that he divided for her. But now she was absent, and he felt like he had lost something. Frank made a comment about it. He said perhaps the unstable woman finally relocated to another diner. Marcus told him to be quiet. Frank looked surprised, but said nothing further. On the 5th day, Marcus still prepared the tea, still divided the muffins, still positioned them on her table. The cup grew cold. The muffins grew hard, but he left them there regardless. Lisa walked past and shook her head. "You're squandering food," she said. "It's my food," Marcus said. "I purchased it." That was untrue. He hadn't purchased it. He had simply taken it. But Lisa didn't challenge it. That evening, after his shift concluded, Marcus walked through the area. He didn't know what he was searching for. Perhaps he thought he would encounter her somewhere, sitting on a bench, standing outside a shop, but he didn't encounter her. The streets were deserted, except for a few people rushing home in the cold. He returned home to Emma. They ate dinner together, instant ramen from a package. Emma told him about school, about a project she had completed, about a friend she played with at lunch. Marcus listened, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the empty booth in the dark corner of the diner, about the woman who previously sat there, about how she had smiled at Emma when she taught her to fold paper. He wondered if she was all right. He wondered if she was still alive. He didn't understand why it mattered so intensely, but it did. On the 6th day she returned. Marcus was refilling the salt shakers when the bell chimed. He glanced up instinctively and saw her standing in the entrance. She looked thinner than before. Her coat hung looser on her body, and there were shadows under her eyes. But she was there. She walked to her customary table and sat down. Marcus felt something release in his chest. He hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding it. He prepared her tea, divided her muffins, brought them over without saying anything. She looked up at him, and her lips moved like she wanted to express something, but no words emerged. She simply nodded. Marcus nodded back and walked away. Lisa leaned over and whispered, "Told you she'd return." Marcus ignored her. The woman drank her tea gradually. She didn't touch the muffins immediately. She simply sat there with her hands wrapped around the cup, staring out the window at the parking lot. Marcus watched her from behind the counter. Something about her seemed altered, more delicate, like she was holding herself together with effort. Later that morning, after the breakfast surge subsided, Marcus cleaned the tables near her. She was writing something in a small journal. The pages were yellowed and the cover was deteriorating. Her handwriting was precise but compressed, like she was attempting to fit excessive words into insufficient space. She didn't look up when he approached. "You all right?" Marcus asked. She stopped writing. She closed the journal and placed her hands flat on top of it. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was quiet. Marcus didn't believe her, but he didn't press. He simply nodded and continued cleaning the table. "Thank you," she added, "for still preparing the tea even when I wasn't here." Marcus stopped cleaning. He looked at her. "How did you know I did that?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Lisa told me. She said you were squandering food." Marcus felt his face heat up. He returned to cleaning the table. "It wasn't squandered," he said. She studied him for an extended moment. Then she opened the journal again and returned to writing. Over the following days, Marcus noticed more unusual things. She would sit in the corner and weep sometimes, not audibly, just silent tears streaming down her face while she stared at nothing. Other times, she would recoil when someone walked too near. Once a woman in business attire settled at the table adjacent to hers, and she stood up so abruptly that she overturned her tea. Marcus rushed over with a cloth to clean it up. She apologized repeatedly, her voice shaking. The woman in business attire didn't even acknowledge her. She simply continued checking her phone. Marcus helped her settle back down. He brought her a fresh cup of tea. She held it with both hands and wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," Marcus said. "Accidents occur." She shook her head. "I'm sorry." Marcus didn't understand what she was apologizing for, but he could perceive that she meant it. Another morning, she was writing in her journal again. Marcus was clearing a nearby table when she suddenly tore out a page, crumpled it up, and shoved it into her pocket. Her hands were shaking. She looked around the diner like she was verifying to see if anyone had noticed. Marcus pretended he hadn't seen anything. He simply continued clearing dishes and moved on to the next table. But he thought about it. He thought about the journal, the tears, the recoiling, how she seemed to be carrying something heavy that nobody else could perceive. He wondered if she was in danger, if she was hiding from someone, or perhaps she was simply ill. Perhaps she had something wrong with her mind. He didn't know, and he didn't know how to inquire. One afternoon, near the conclusion of his shift, Marcus saw her sitting in the corner with her head down on the table. Her arms were folded under her head, and her shoulders were shaking. He approached. "Hey," he said, gently. "You all right?" She didn't lift her head. She simply shook it slowly. Marcus looked around. The diner was mostly empty. Lisa was in the back. Frank had already departed. He crouched down beside her table. "What's wrong?" he asked. She lifted her head slightly. Her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red. "I'm just exhausted," she said. Her voice cracked. "When's the last time you ate something substantial?" Marcus asked. She didn't answer. Marcus stood up and went to the kitchen. He returned with a sandwich, ham and Swiss on wheat bread. Nothing elaborate. He positioned it before her. "Eat," he said. She looked at the sandwich like she didn't understand what to do with it. Then she picked it up and took a small bite. She chewed slowly. Marcus watched her for a moment, then returned to the counter. When his shift concluded, she was still there. The sandwich was partially eaten. She was staring out the window again. Marcus grabbed his jacket and approached. "You should go somewhere warm," he said. She looked at him. "I don't have anywhere warm." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had suspected as much, but hearing her articulate it made it real. "Where do you sleep?" he asked. She shrugged. "Different places." Marcus thought about Emma, about the apartment they occupied. It was small, and the heating didn't always function, and the walls were thin, but it was warm, and it was safe. He thought about what it would be like to not have that, to not have anywhere to go. "You can't remain here," he said. "They'll secure the building soon." She nodded. She stood up and pulled her coat tighter around herself. Then she walked toward the door. Marcus watched her depart. He felt powerless. That evening he couldn't stop thinking about her, about where she was sleeping, if she was cold, if she was safe. Emma asked him what was troubling him, and Marcus said nothing, but Emma kept looking at him with those large, worried eyes. So Marcus told her he was simply tired. Emma seemed to accept that. The next morning she was back. Marcus prepared her tea, divided her muffins. She consumed them slowly and drank the tea like it was the only warm thing she would receive all day. Perhaps it was. Later, when the diner was quiet, she spoke to him. She asked if he was content. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked. She gestured around the diner. "Here, doing this. Are you content?" Marcus thought about it. He thought about the early mornings and the insufficient pay, and how his back ached at the conclusion of every shift. He thought about Emma and the bills and the science camp money he still hadn't determined. He thought about the dream he previously had, the one about opening his own bakery, about creating pastries that people would remember. That dream felt like it belonged to someone else now. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I'm surviving." She looked at him with those exhausted eyes. "That's not the same thing." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at her tea. "Do you ever think about kindness?" she asked. Marcus frowned. "About what?" "Kindness," she said. "Do you ever think about it? About whether it's worth anything?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't think about it much. I just do what feels right." She smiled faintly. "That's rare." "What is?" Marcus asked. "Doing what feels right without thinking about it," she said. "Most people calculate. They weigh the cost. They decide if it's worth it." She looked up at him. "You don't do that." Marcus felt uncomfortable. He didn't like being examined so closely. "I just make tea," he said. She shook her head. "No, you see people. You saw me. Everyone else looked away." Marcus didn't know what to say. He returned to wiping the counter. Several days later, she asked him about his dream, about opening a bakery. Marcus was surprised. She remembered. He had only mentioned it once. "If you could do it," she said, "if you had the resources and the time and nobody depending on you, would you?" Marcus thought about Emma, about how much she needed him, about how leaving his job would mean no income and no health coverage and no way to maintain the apartment. He thought about all the things he couldn't afford to risk. "It doesn't matter," he said. "I can't." She leaned forward. "But if you could, would you?" Marcus met her eyes. There was something intense in her gaze, something that made him feel like his answer mattered more than it should. "Yes," he said, "I would." She sat back. She smiled. "Good. Why does that matter?" Marcus asked. She didn't answer. She simply returned to drinking her tea. That conversation stuck with him. He thought about it while he cooked dinner for Emma, while he assisted with homework, while he lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling. He thought about what it would be like to begin again, to have an opportunity. It felt impossible. But for the first time in years, he permitted himself to imagine it. The woman continued visiting the diner. She and Marcus talked more. Small conversations, nothing profound. But Marcus began to feel like he knew her, even though he didn't know her name, didn't know where she originated or why she was how she was. But he knew the way she held her teacup, the way she folded the napkin after she ate, the way she looked at Emma when she came in like she was observing something precious that she had lost. One morning, she didn't appear. Marcus prepared the tea anyway, positioned it on her table. The seat remained vacant. The next day, she didn't appear either. Marcus felt the concern creeping back. He told himself she was fine, that perhaps she had discovered somewhere better to go, but he didn't believe it. On the third day, he asked Lisa if she had seen the woman. Lisa shook her head. "Perhaps she finally received help," Lisa said, "or perhaps she simply moved on." Marcus didn't respond. He simply continued working. On the fourth day, Frank made a comment. He said, "The vagrant must have died from exposure." Marcus turned around and told him to shut his mouth. Frank looked shocked. So did Lisa. Marcus had never raised his voice at work before, but he didn't care. He went to the back and stood in the walk-in cooler for several minutes, letting the frigid air sting his face. When he emerged, Lisa was waiting for him. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," Marcus said. "You're not fine," Lisa said. "You're upset about that woman." Marcus said nothing. Lisa sighed. "Look, I understand. You feel bad for her, but you can't rescue everyone, Marcus. You can barely rescue yourself." Marcus knew she was correct, but it didn't make him feel any better. On the fifth day, Marcus still prepared the tea, still divided the muffins. He positioned them on her table and left them there. The cup grew cold. The muffins got hard, but he didn't discard them. At the conclusion of his shift, he walked through the area again. He checked the park, the bus stations, the alleys. He didn't encounter her anywhere. He felt a heaviness in his chest that he couldn't shake. That evening, Emma asked him why he was sad. Marcus said he wasn't sad. Emma didn't believe him. "Is it because of the lady?" Emma asked. Marcus looked at her. "What lady?" "The one who taught me to fold paper," Emma said. "She's kind. Is she okay?" Marcus didn't know what to say. He pulled Emma into an embrace. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said quietly. "I hope so." On the sixth day, Marcus woke up with a knot in his stomach. He got Emma ready for school, dropped her off, went to work. The diner was the same as always, the same smell, the same sounds, the same people ordering the same things. But the booth in the dark corner was empty. Marcus prepared the tea, divided the muffins, positioned them down. The routine had become something like a prayer, a way of hoping that she was still out there, that she was still alive. Lisa didn't say anything this time. She simply watched him with sad eyes. The day dragged on. Marcus moved through his shift like he was underwater. Everything felt slow and muffled. He kept glancing at the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for her to walk in. She didn't. At the conclusion of the day, Marcus removed his apron and hung it up. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. He looked back at the empty booth one more time, the cold tea, the untouched muffins. He didn't understand why it hurt so much. She was just a woman, a stranger, someone he barely knew. But she had become part of his routine, part of his day. And now she was gone. Marcus walked home in the dark. The streets were empty and the air was cold. He thought about her sitting in the park somewhere, or huddled in a doorway, or lying in a hospital, or worse. He thought about all the things he should have done, should have asked her name, should have given her his number, should have found her help, should have done more. But he hadn't, and now it was too late. When he got home, Emma was already asleep. Marcus sat on the couch and stared at the wall. He felt hollow, like something had been taken from him that he didn't know he needed. He didn't sleep much that evening. He kept thinking about her, about how she had smiled when Emma folded the paper butterfly, about how she had asked him if he would begin again if he could, about how she had said that kindness was the most valuable thing a person could possess. He wondered if she had been attempting to tell him something, if there had been a message he was supposed to comprehend. But if there was, he had missed it. The next morning, Marcus went to work. He prepared the tea, divided the muffins, positioned them on the table. The booth was still empty, and he knew deep down that it was going to remain that way. The door burst open just after 10 in the morning. Marcus was refilling the condiment bottles when he heard it. He glanced up and froze. 6 men in Navy uniforms walked in first. They were tall and broad-shouldered and moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Behind them came 3 people in black, 2 men and a woman. They carried briefcases and wore the type of clothes that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. The diner went silent. Everyone stopped talking. Even the coffee machine seemed to hum softer. The woman in black looked around the room. Her eyes were sharp and calculating. She walked up to the counter where Lisa was standing. Lisa stared at her like she had just witnessed a ghost. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her voice was calm and professional. "I'm looking for someone, a man named Marcus Chen. Does he work here?" Lisa nodded slowly. She pointed at Marcus without saying a word. The woman turned and looked at him. So did the men beside her. So did all 6 of the men in Navy. Marcus felt his heart begin to pound. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew it wasn't good. People like this didn't walk into places like Riverside Diner unless something was very wrong. The woman walked over to him. She stopped a few feet away and studied his face. "Are you Marcus Chen?" she asked. Marcus nodded. His mouth was too dry to speak. "My name is Victoria Caldwell," the woman said. "I'm an attorney representing the estate of Catherine Whitmore." She gestured to the men beside her. "These are my colleagues, Daniel Frost and James Mitchell. We need to speak with you. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Marcus felt the floor tilt under him. Catherine, that was her name. He had never known it before. And now this woman was standing in front of him, saying words like estate and attorney, and he didn't comprehend any of it. "What's going on?" Marcus asked. His voice came out rough. Victoria looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "Perhaps we should sit down," she said. Marcus led them to the back corner, to the table where she used to sit. The teacup was still there, cold and untouched. Victoria glanced at it, but didn't say anything. The 6 men in navy uniforms stayed near the entrance. They didn't sit. They simply stood there with their hands folded in front of them, watching. Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Daniel and James did the same. They all sat down across from Marcus. He sat in the chair where she used to sit. It felt wrong. "Mr. Chen," Victoria began, "I'm very sorry to inform you that Catherine Whitmore passed away 3 nights ago." Marcus felt something cold rush through him. He had known. Deep down, he had known. But hearing it articulated made it real, made it final. "How?" he asked quietly. "Heart failure," Victoria said. She had been ill for some time. She knew it was approaching. Marcus stared at the table. He thought about how she had looked the last time he saw her, thin and exhausted and delicate. He thought about the shaking hands, the tears, the journal. He thought about all the things he should have asked, should have done. "Why are you here?" Marcus asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Victoria exchanged a glance with Daniel. Then she looked back at Marcus. "Because Miss Whitmore left very specific instructions," Victoria said. "She wanted us to find you. She wanted us to deliver something to you personally." Marcus looked up at her. "What?" James opened his folder and pulled out an envelope. It was thick and cream-colored and sealed with wax. He slid it across the table. Marcus stared at it. "Before you open that," Victoria said, "there's something you need to know. Catherine Whitmore was not who you thought she was." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Miss Whitmore was a very wealthy woman. She inherited a significant fortune from her family. At the time of her death, her estate was valued at approximately $850 million. Marcus blinked. He looked at Victoria like she had just spoken a different language. "That's not possible," he said. "She was homeless. She didn't have anything." "She had everything," Daniel said quietly. "She just chose not to show it." Victoria nodded. 3 years ago, Miss Whitmore experienced a series of personal tragedies. She lost her husband in a plane crash. Her only child, a daughter, died from illness shortly after. She fell into a deep depression and withdrew from her life entirely. She began living anonymously, moving from place to place, attempting to understand who she was without her wealth and status. She wanted to see how people would treat her when she had nothing. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He thought about the tattered coat, the matted hair, how she had recoiled when people got too close. He thought about how everyone in the diner had avoided her, had called her names, had wished she would leave. Everyone except him. "She visited this diner because it was ordinary," Victoria continued, "because nobody knew who she was, and for months nobody treated her like a person. Nobody except you." Marcus looked down at the envelope. His hands were shaking. "She wrote about you," James said. "In her journal, she wrote about how you prepared her tea, how you divided her muffins into small pieces so it would be easier for her to eat, how you never asked her for anything, never made her feel insignificant. She said you were the only person who saw her as human." Marcus felt his eyes begin to burn. He blinked hard. Victoria reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a check. She slid it across the table next to the envelope. Marcus looked down at it. The number was written in neat black ink. $2 million. He stared at it. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. "This is for you," Victoria said. "Catherine wanted you to have it. She left instructions that it was to be delivered to you personally, along with that letter." Marcus shook his head. "I can't accept this." "You can," Daniel said, "and you should. It was her wish." Marcus looked at the check again. $2 million. He thought about Emma, about the overdue bills, about the apartment with the broken heating, about the dream he had abandoned, about all the things he could do with that money, all the problems it would solve. But he also thought about her, about the woman who had sat in this chair and drank cold tea and wept in silence, about how she had smiled at Emma, about how she had asked him if he would begin again if he could. He picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. The handwriting was neat and careful. He recognized it from the journal she used to carry. The letter read, "Dear Marcus, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was still here. But I want you to know that you saved me. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. You didn't fix me or rescue me or change my life. You just treated me like I mattered. And that was everything. I spent 3 years attempting to discover who I was without money, without status, without the things that people said made me valuable. And what I discovered was that most people didn't see me at all. I was invisible. I was inconvenient. I was something to be avoided. But you saw me. You prepared me tea. You divided my muffins. You asked me how I was. You let your daughter talk to me like I was a person worth knowing. You did all of that without knowing who I was or what I had. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and that is rarer than you know. I'm leaving you this money because I want you to have the opportunity I had, the opportunity to begin again, to build something that matters, to chase the dream you told me about. But more than that, I'm leaving it to you because I trust you. I trust that you will use it the way it was meant to be used, not to purchase things or to escape your life, but to make the world a little bit better, the way you made mine better. Thank you for seeing me, Marcus. Thank you for treating me like I was worth something. You will never know how much that meant. With gratitude, Catherine." Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. His hands were still shaking. His eyes were wet. He wiped them quickly with the back of his hand. Victoria and Daniel and James sat quietly and waited. The diner around them had returned to its usual noise. People talking, dishes clattering, the coffee machine hissing. But at this table, everything was still. "What am I supposed to do with this?" Marcus asked. His voice cracked. "That's up to you," Victoria said. "The money is yours. No conditions, no strings. She trusted you to decide." Marcus looked at the check again. He thought about what Lisa had said, that he could barely rescue himself. He thought about Emma, about the life he could give her with this money, a better apartment, a better school, university someday, security. But he also thought about Catherine, about how she had looked at him when she asked if kindness was worth anything, about how she had smiled when he said he would begin again if he could. He thought about what she would want him to do. Marcus folded the check and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Victoria. "I want to establish a fund," he said. "A charity for people like her, people who need help, women who are struggling, children who don't have enough, people who are invisible." Victoria studied him for an extended moment. Then she smiled. It was small, but genuine. "I think she knew you would say that," Victoria said. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked with Victoria, Daniel, and James to establish the Catherine Whitmore Foundation. The fund would provide support for homeless women, children in need, and anyone who had fallen through the cracks. It would pay for meals and shelter and medical care. It would pay for the things that people like Catherine needed when they had nothing. Marcus didn't quit his job at the diner. He still worked the morning shift. He still prepared tea and divided muffins. But now every morning he set aside a portion of his wages and added it to the foundation. It wasn't much, but it was something. Emma asked him once why he gave the money away, why he didn't use it to make their life easier. Marcus thought about how to answer that. Then he told Emma about Catherine, about the woman who used to sit in the corner, about how she had taught her to fold paper, about how she had smiled. "She taught me something important," Marcus said. "She taught me that people matter, even when nobody else sees them, even when they don't have anything to give back, they still matter." Emma thought about that. Then she nodded. "I think she was right," Emma said. On a cold Saturday morning in January, Marcus and Emma drove to the cemetery. Marcus carried a thermos of tea and a small bag with 2 muffins inside. He had divided them into small pieces, the way he always did. They walked through the rows of headstones until they found hers. It was simple, just her name and the dates. Catherine Whitmore, beloved wife, beloved mother. Marcus knelt down and positioned the tea and the muffins on the ground in front of the stone. Emma stood beside him and put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Is she really here?" Emma asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't think so. I think she's somewhere else." "Somewhere better?" "Yes." Emma looked at the headstone. "Do you miss her?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, I do." They stood there for a while in silence. The wind blew cold, and the sky was gray. But Marcus didn't feel cold. He felt something else, something warm and solid in his chest. He thought about the letter, about the words she had written. "You saw me. You treated me like I was worth something." He thought about all the people in the world who felt invisible, who felt like they didn't matter, who sat in the corners of diners and waited for someone to notice them. And he made a promise to her, to himself, to everyone who needed it. He would keep seeing them. He would keep treating them like they mattered, because they did. Marcus stood up and took Emma's hand. They walked back through the cemetery together. Behind them, the tea sat steaming in the cold air. The muffins sat waiting, and somewhere Marcus hoped Catherine was smiling.